Just as the Seahawks start to get healthier along the defensive line, injuries are now striking in the secondary with a big-name veteran now out for at least 4 games. How much could this hurt Mike Macdonald's defense? We'll be breaking it all down here on Matchup Wednesday on Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here for the latest installment of Matchup Wednesday by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. If you're in nearby Port Angeles or if you're in Butte, Montana, we appreciate each and every one of you. We're drawing closer to Week 7. The Seahawks hitting the road to face the red-hot Atlanta Falcons. Going to be a difficult task to go on the road and get that win at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're going to be looking at 6 key matchups to watch, 3 on offense, 3 on defense for the Seahawks. They head into this must-win game as they look to snap a 3-game losing streak. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. There was some good news coming from Mike Macdonald today during his Wednesday press conference. Byron Murphy II returning to practice, at least in a limited fashion today, after missing 3 games with a hamstring injury. Unfortunately, only about 20 minutes after that press conference ended, the Seahawks announced that safety Rayshawn Jenkins is heading to injured reserve, the second defensive back in as many days to land on injured reserve. Artie Burns yesterday, hurting the cornerback depth. Now one of the starting safeties going to miss at least the next 4 games, including this big one on the road against a very high-powered Atlanta Falcons offensive attack. Now, Rob, you and I, we talked about this on Monday's show. Jenkins really struggled last week against the 49ers, but as you pointed out, and I obviously noticed this as well, he had a club on one of his hands, and that clearly was impacting his ability to be able to come up and tackle. And I think that this is a statement. Either Jenkins told the team, hey, I tried this for a game, I can't get through this, I got to let this heal, or the Seahawks themselves said, hey, the performance was not up to where we need it to be. We got to go with somebody that's got 2 healthy hands that can go out and tackle. But either way, that seems to be the deciding factor here that is putting him on injured reserve. And even though he didn't play well Thursday, this does feel like a pretty significant loss for Mike Macdonald's defense for a number of different reasons.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, for one, Rayshawn Jenkins is one of Seattle's most experienced defensive backs. Obviously not in Seattle as a free agent that was brought in by the Seahawks this offseason, but still, he has been a quality starter in the NFL now for several years. And so the fact that you are going to be missing him when you're going up against a team that is playing as well as the Atlanta Falcons, that have the versatility that they have on offense. Like, they have a big play wide receiver combination. They have a terrific running back. They've got a dynamic former top 10 selection at the tight end position as well. Kirk Cousins is an MVP candidate. This is a frightening scenario for the Seahawks. That said, as Mike Macdonald has kind of mentioned before, rather than bemoan the loss of a player, I think it's exciting to kind of acknowledge the potential that you might see from a player like a Ty Okada, who was brought up off of the practice squad, presumably to replace Rayshawn Jenkins. And whether we see Ty Okada on the field against the Atlanta Falcons this week, or whether it be a Kobe Bryant or Kayvon Wallace, obviously a Julian Love, it is a significant injury. And you mentioned Artie Burns as well, considering that the Seattle still has some concerns about at corner with Tariq Woolen and others at the cornerback spot. Then this is a potential huge concern against the Atlanta Falcons offense that is absolutely humming right now.
Yeah, you mentioned the Burns injury. I thought that was a significant one yesterday, just because when you consider how he played against San Francisco, he was one of the bright spots. He had a couple pass breakups in that game in his first opportunity to play this year, but he's been dealing with that toe injury since the preseason finale, and he just keeps re-aggravating it. So hopefully now, taking 4 weeks away or so, he's going to be able to come back. They're going to need him at some point with some of the depth concerns. Trey Brown also did not practice today, and not trending towards playing this weekend, that would be huge because now we're talking you're going from potentially having Reek Woolen, Artie Burns, Devin Witherspoon, and Trey Brown as your top 4 corners to now you've got Devin Witherspoon, and then it's Nehemiah Pritchett after him. So there's a huge drop-off. You're asking a ton of a rookie, and D. Williams might have to play some corner for the Seahawks at this point with the way that the injuries are stacking up for them back there. But the safety situation, I'm wondering if this is going to be played by Mike Macdonald, kind of how he handled Jerome Baker's absence, albeit at a different position. We saw Drake Thomas and Tyrese Knight platooning in different sub packages. I wonder if we might see Mike Macdonald do that with Kayvon Wallace and Kobe Bryant in the next 4 weeks. Try to mix and match those guys. Maybe you have 3 safety looks where they're both on the field together. Not something you're going to see with Drake Thomas and Tyrese Knight playing together unless both starters are out. But you can do that at the safety position. I'm wondering if that's an option. And I'm going to throw one other thing out there. I'd be surprised if he's ready to play this week because he just returned to practice. But Jarek Reed II, we talked about it on Monday. I absolutely think Jarek Reed II has the talent to start in the National Football League. I think he can be a starter caliber player. Could this be the opportunity here in the next couple of weeks where if he's fully healthy, he's a high energy, explosive, versatile player, seems like the kind of guy Mike Macdonald would love to have on his defense because of all those different traits. I'm wondering if he's fully healthy, if Jarek Reed II ends up being the guy that gets a lot of playing time down the line here. I'm not expecting it this weekend since he just started practicing, but that is a wild card to watch here as Mike Macdonald tries to figure out how to maneuver through this without one of his veteran leaders in Rayshawn Jenkins.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, Jarek Reed, his presence back on the field for the Seahawks, as you mentioned, I believe in yesterday's show, just kind of acknowledging what a special teams standout that Jarek Reed was. That was something that in the past with Pete Carroll had always been kind of the, just one of the stepping points to getting themselves onto the field on defense. And when we saw that happen over and over again with some of Seattle's best players, they make a stand out on special teams and then earn a little bit more time on defense. I really think that Jarek Reed is going to be a starter in the future for the Seahawks. And as I mentioned before, anybody who watched the preseason saw Ty Okada make a bunch of plays. I mean, both as a hitter and as an interceptor. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he is the player that actually gets the first opportunity to get some significant playing time. Again, when you're going up against a team like the Atlanta Falcons and a veteran quarterback like Kirk Cousins, that's a little bit frightening. But also, Kirk Cousins has 5 interceptions so far this season. All of them when the opponent was able to get a little bit of pressure in his face, and he will throw a duck up there for you to exploit. And so I wouldn't be surprised at all if Seattle is able to create some of those interception opportunities. Turnover margin has been one of the biggest, ugliest numbers for the Seahawks so far this season. If they can create a little bit of pressure, regardless of who is back there playing safety, there could be some playmaking opportunities for them to exploit.
One last injury update that I think is worth noting coming out of today. Anthony Bradford and Stone Forsythe both were non-participants today. Now, these guys have struggled. There may be some fans out there saying, all right, we get to see Christian Haynes, and that would be the opportunity for Christian Haynes here to maybe start his first NFL game if Bradford cannot turn the corner and play this weekend. But Stone Forsythe is your number 3 right tackle. If he is not able to play in this game, your options, you're not going to have George Fant back. He's not ready to practice yet. You don't have Abraham Lucas back. You either go with the 6th-round pick, Mike Jarrell, or Jason Peters, the ageless wonder, makes his debut off the practice squad. I would think that Peters would be the one. Now that he's been practicing for 3 weeks, I would suspect that he's now probably ready to go, at least in terms of being in football shape, ready to go to play in this game. But you're asking a 42-year-old to jump right back in and start at right tackle in that scenario. So that is something to watch where depth is really going to be tested for the Seahawks. It's early in the week. Forsythe and Bradford may be ready to play by the time we get to Friday or even Sunday. But right now, those 2 guys are 2 players to watch very closely who missed practice on Wednesday. When we come back, as we do each and every matchup Wednesday, we're going to dive into the key matchups to watch. This time we're going to start with the Seahawks on offense going up against the Falcons on defense. We'll get to that coming up next here on Matchup Wednesday on Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're tasked with hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. As a site manager on Seahawks on SI, LinkedIn Jobs is my go-to to post writing positions to land top candidates. They've made the process so easy and seamless, and it isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has vast networks of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. And it's so easy to use. In fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even recently launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to, and they make it faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This episode is also brought your way by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And it's not just you against the numbers. It's not just you going against a bunch of other contestants. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform that offers an injury insurance policy so your lineups stay in play. Even if one of your players gets injured, your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. And Prize Picks is the best place to get the real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. You can even take part in the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if your picks don't hit. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in worldwide. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. And for your second listen, make sure to check out our friends at the Locked On NFL podcast. It's now 2 days a week. You've got our good friend Tyler Rowland of the Locked On Titans podcast. He's kicking things off in the morning with a shot of espresso on the first show. And then Tony Wiggins, our buddy from Locked On Jaguars, he's going to be dishing out all the hot takes on our second Locked On NFL show. Again, 2 shows every single day. Make sure that you're listening in either on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, Rob, let's talk matchups. The Seahawks looking to right the ship, 3 straight losses. Not necessarily the easiest draw to do that. Heading to Atlanta to face the NFC South leading Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins and company. Let's start on the offensive side of the football for the Seahawks and how they can attack this Falcons defense that has been solid but not spectacular. Where they have really thrived is keeping teams out of the end zone, kind of that bend but don't break mentality. They've been very good at that, even though they have given up a lot of yards, relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the league. What's a matchup that really jumps out to you?
Well, I think that it's critical that the Seahawks get their running backs more involved. And look, I mean, the Seahawks completed 8 receptions to Kenneth Walker III a week ago against the San Francisco 49ers. They are averaging 4.0 per throw to Kenneth Walker. Look, if Seattle is going to continue to struggle to run the football, then I think another way of course, getting their running backs involved is just to throw the ball out of the backfield. And the Falcons have a quality middle linebacker in Caden Ellis. He is a player that was very effective with the New Orleans Saints before. They also have a rookie who is likely going to be starting for them in J.D. Bertrand, a rookie from the Notre Dame, who is a good football player. He's an instinctive player. He's not an elite athlete. Look, they had Troy Anderson, who is a better athlete, frankly, but also is struggling a little bit with injury. Nate Landman from previously at Colorado also is struggling with injury. So again, I do expect it to ultimately be the rookie J.D. Bertrand who is going to be starting alongside Caden Ellis. And I think that is a matchup that Seattle should be able to exploit. The Falcons have some quality size in the middle of their defensive line, but this is not an explosive defensive line group, despite the fact that they have a, absolute Seahawk monster in Grady Jarrett. But I do think that there should be some space for Seattle to be able to create some running room and to be able to create some space for their running backs to eat as receivers. So to me, the conversation begins. I know everybody wants to talk about DK Metcalf or Geno Smith, et cetera, but I really think that this is going to be a game yet again that is going to be won or lost at the line of scrimmage, and the Seahawks have to be the aggressor and get K9 and Zach Charbonnet as well involved early and often in this football game.
The Falcons are going to be coming into this game 26th in the NFL in rushing, meaning they are just a blip ahead of the Seattle Seahawks. And we know the issues the Seahawks have had stopping the run. The Falcons are right in that same zip code. So they have had their issues defending the run this year. This feels like one of those games, if you can't get your run game going this week, then you really got to question whether they're going to be able to run the ball at all consistently this year. This should be a game that you can attack the linebackers. Caden Ellis is a really good athlete. He can get upfield. He can create as a blitzer, but he's a little bit light in the pants. This is a guy that if you get physical and you're able to get that downhill run game going at him, you can win some battles that way. And Bertram, coming from Notre Dame, as you mentioned, he's instinctive, but this is a guy that's had some issues dating back to his college career where if he gets matched up against athletic guys in coverage, he can have some real issues. I think you find ways to get Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet one-on-one against those linebackers, and I like their odds to be able to produce as receivers too. So I think that's an important matchup. But if you're going to run the football, and if you're quite frankly going to do anything in this game, the Seahawks have learned the hard way too many times against Grady Jarrett. I'm not even going to mention the rest of the defensive line in the interior. Grady Jarrett has been a Seahawks murderer over the years. This guy hasn't mattered who subs in at guard or center. He is constantly living in the backfield, and it's interesting. It feels like the sack numbers for him have dipped a lot the last 3 or 4 years, but I guarantee he's going to find a way to get to Geno Smith at least once in this game. The onus falls on Laken Tomlinson. Maybe Christian Haynes gets a start in this game, and Connor Williams in the center position. You've got to be able to find a way to neutralize Grady Jarrett. He's going to make some plays. He always does, but you can't let him dominate in the interior to the point where he makes it your game plan completely unravels, and he has done that to the Seahawks in the past. So you want to get K9 established. You want to get Geno Smith some time to be able to get the ball to his receivers. The guards, it's interior pressure that they have to be worried about. The Falcons have 5 sacks this entire year, but I'm still worried about big number 97 inside because of his track record. He's going to be playing in front of the home crowd. He is the one that they have to prevent from disrupting their game plan.
Yeah, and as you said, Corbin, the Atlanta Falcons have 5 sacks in 6 games. That's dead last in the NFL. So, look, I have a great deal of respect for number 97, Grady Jarrett. He's a terrific football player. But I also think that because he is playing a little bit more outside, that is kind of sapping some of that initial juice that he provides as a pass rusher. I think that Geno Smith has got to be very much aware of him. But at the same time, I do feel confident that Seattle is going to be able to create a clean pocket for Geno Smith to be able to operate, and again for the Seahawks running backs to be able to potentially excel in this football game. Again, with all due respect to Grady Jarrett, they've got a good football player inside, and Eddie Goldman. David Onyemata is also a good player, but this is not a big, bulky defensive line. There should be some running space in this football game. They should be able to create a pocket for Geno Smith to be able to create some, not necessarily the deep passing that I know the offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb would love to exploit. But at the same time, I do feel like there should be some opportunities in the short to intermediate zones. Now, whether that be at the wide receiver, the tight end, or running back positions, this should be an efficient game for the Seahawks passing attack, and that should lead to some success in the running game as well.
And going to the outside, we'd be remiss not to mention the Seahawks receivers against Atlanta's. I'm going to say secondary in general. I mean, you've got Jesse Bates, you've got Justin Simmons at the safety positions. A.J. Terrell is a really solid corner on the outside. But DK Metcalf, you want to talk about a player with a track record. DK Metcalf has burned A.J. Terrell consistently. This has been a very one-sided matchup in multiple games. Now, past games don't really have a bearing when we're talking about upcoming games, but at the same time, that's going to be something that might be on the mind of A.J. Terrell, like, oh man, I got to deal with this guy again. He has struggled mightily against him. And then you add in the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba from the slot, the player that has struggled the most secondary-wise in coverage has been D. Alford, the slot defender for Atlanta. This feels like a game that Jackson Smith-Njigba should be able to get a lot of work done in the short to intermediate game, maybe even get a downfield throw mixed in there. Atlanta has been very good at eliminating the explosive plays. So Ryan Grubb's going to have to make sure that he doesn't get too aggressive from that sense and play into what Atlanta's wanting to do. Take what the defense is giving you. Geno will take those short passes. He's proven he'll do that. You can dink and dunk your way down the field, mix in the run game, and then eventually there will be a shot play that comes up. But those receivers, I think the short to intermediate game is where they're going to be able to excel, and DK Metcalf getting that shot play in there. He has had it against A.J. Terrell several times. That is the matchup there to watch closely.
Well, and I agree with you to a point. I really think that that Geno Smith has shown the ability to dink and dunk his way down the field. I don't know that it's either Geno Smith or Ryan Grubb as the play caller, but I think that that's been one of the concerns so far this season. It's felt like almost that they had to rely on big plays. Will they show the patience to dink and dunk their way down the field? That to me is one of the real storylines of this football game. You got a former University of Washington offensive coordinator, of course, and Ryan Grubb calling the plays for the Seahawks. You have a former defensive coordinator and head coach in Jimmy Lake calling the plays on the defensive side of the ball. So this is kind of a fascinating matchup here from a regional perspective for University of Washington fans, and obviously for Seahawks fans, going up against a head coach in Raheem Morris that they were very familiar with after his success with the Los Angeles Rams the last couple of seasons. This is a head coach and a defensive staff that is very much going to force you to kind of dink and dunk your way down the field. And you mentioned the safety play. Look, I'm as fascinated as anybody with the matchup, one-on-one matchup between A.J. Terrell, cornerback, and then, of course, the DK Metcalf at wide receiver. And I love that you mentioned, Jackson Smith-Njigba at the slot receiver position. I think this could be another game where Tyler Lockett is pretty sneaky with this. Mike Hughes is a quality corner on the outside spot as well, but still, this feels like a cornerback position that the Seahawks should be able to take advantage of. But at the safety positions with Justin Simmons, a former All-Pro, Jesse Bates III, a very good football player that the Falcons were able to kind of wrestle away from the Cincinnati Bengals as well. I think that the Atlanta Falcons safeties, are very good, whereas the corners can be beaten. So do the Seahawks have the patience to kind of dink and dunk, or are they going to be aggressive? If they are aggressive, then I think you have to look for the one-on-one matchups. If you allow Atlanta's safeties to get into the position, then I think that they might be able to kind of create some of the turnovers that have helped the Atlanta Falcons get off to this 4-2 start, and obviously have helped the Seahawks shoot themselves in the foot, especially these last 3 games during this losing streak.
When we come back, the Falcons offense has been must-see TV, getting Atlanta to the top of the NFC South. We're going to look at key matchups for the Seahawks defense to deal with as they travel to Atlanta. That's coming up next here on Matchup Wednesday on Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends over at FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the latest play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can bet on everything from Kyle Pitts scoring a touchdown against the Seahawks, or Jackson Smith-Njigba being the first player in Sunday's game with a 30-plus yard reception. Just throw in a $5 bet and you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. Welcome back to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. As your host, Corbin Smith, glad to be joined as always by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. And thanks for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Let's flip the script now here. We've talked Seahawks offense against the Falcons defense. What really is going to dictate whether the Seahawks can go on the road and get this win, however, is the defense finding a way to play at a higher level against one of the hottest offensive attacks in the NFL, a team that can run it, they can sling the ball over the yard. The Falcons are in that pick your poison situation now that's making it really tough on opposing defenses with all the skill talent and obviously Kirk Cousins now at the wheel for this offensive attack. What's the first matchup that you're going to be watching closely for the Seahawks on defense as they try to slow down this high-octane Atlanta offense?
Can the Seahawks stop the run? I mean, it's going to sound like a broken record. I mean, that to me is this matchup. It's every single matchup moving forward. So, let's just focus in at the running back position against Seattle's linebackers. And Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson, as I said in yesterday's show, Corbin, where I gave Seattle's inside linebackers a D, as in dog, as in damned, as in lack of defense at the running or at the linebacker position. I mean, that has been the most disturbing thing for me. And when you consider the fact that the Atlanta Falcons have an absolute stud in Bijan Robinson as their primary running back, but also Tyler Algier is very much a physical pounding kind of back. It's very similar to what the Seahawks have. And Kenneth Walker III, of course, is the flash and dash. And then you have the smash in Zach Charbonnet. Very much similar kind of a situation here with Bijan Robinson gets all the publicity, and then Tyler Algier is the guy who will actually knock you on your backside. And so I do think that that's the critical matchup here. If the Seahawks can make the Atlanta Falcons one-dimensional, they can get a little bit of pressure on Kirk Cousins. As I mentioned before, he's got 5 interceptions so far this season. It's only been 6 football games. So for a possible MVP candidate, and he has been dynamic. Don't get me wrong. He has been spectacular in the fourth quarter, but he has been very much Clark Kent in the first 3 quarters of the game before morphing into Superman in the fourth quarter of these football games. So to me, it all comes down to, can the Seahawks hold up? Can they create the kind of gang tackling that we saw in that 3-game winning streak to start the beginning of the season? Or if they're unable to slow down Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, then the Atlanta Falcons are literally going to be able to run away from the Seahawks in this contest.
And you also have to account for the receiving ability from Bijan Robinson as well.
Sure.
And the coverage has been average for the linebackers for the Seahawks, but this is a different beast when you are dealing with a running back like Bijan Robinson who could play receiver in the NFL. He's just got that dynamic all-around skill set. So I'm with you. That is going to be a matchup to watch. It's weird because normally we talk the trenches. I'm not going to talk the trenches at all in any of the matchups here today because it is about the skill guys in this game. And I think if we didn't have the injury situation at cornerback, maybe right now we'd be talking about the edge rushers against Matthews and company, the tackles for the Falcons. But listen, as we mentioned earlier, Riq Woolen, he did not practice today. There's a good chance he misses the second straight game. Trey Brown did not practice. You've got some real injury concerns there. Right now, Nehemiah Pritchett would be starting at the other cornerback spot with Devin Witherspoon, and you'd probably have to plug D. Williams in there because the injuries have taken a toll on that secondary. And this is a Falcons team that's got some real weapons on the outside. Drake London's maybe been the biggest beneficiary of the quarterback upgrade that is Kirk Cousins, already 4 touchdowns this year. A big play target. He's 6'4", 6'5". He's a big guy to try to defend as well. Seattle doesn't have any size at corner if Riq Woolen is not playing in this game. So this could be a potentially difficult matchup for the Seahawks to try to weather the storm with the injuries when you consider Drake London and a really good receiving core. Darnell Mooney's been a great addition for them as well. This is a dynamic receiving core for the Atlanta Falcons, and Seattle shorthanded. You might be missing Mike Jackson more than you have been.
Yeah, no question about it. And Rayshawn McLeod is a pretty dynamic slot receiver as well for the Falcons. And Kirk Cousins is always taking advantage of his slot receivers. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. I mean, again, while I have my biggest concerns just from a schematic standpoint, from Seattle's inability to slow down any running backs so far. I mean, we're talking about a whole bunch of backup and third string running backs. Bijan Robinson is one of the most talented backs I've seen come down the pike in the NFL draft in the last 25 years. So again, that's where I have to start the conversation. But Drake London is a different type of a player, and the Seahawks right now are very ill-suited to handle him. He leads the Falcons in catches, receiving yards, first downs, and touchdowns. he is their primary option in the receiving game. And if the Seahawks don't have Tariq Woolen or Trey Brown, as it appears likely to be the case right now, then yes, that is a terrifying combination again, because you're going to want to have your safeties kind of creep up to slow down the running game. And Kirk Cousins, while he does not have an elite arm, he throws the ball with beautiful touch, and he is among the NFL's best when it comes to looking one way and then throwing the other. And that is where a guy like a Drake London, with his size and his ability to go up and catch jump balls, then he might be able to just absolutely control this football game. So again, I think that you have to give some respect to the rest of the Atlanta Falcons pass catchers, but there's no question about it. Drake London is going to be the pass catcher that Seattle has to absolutely game plan against, perhaps even cheat a safety over to try and double team him. And again, that's just going to create that many more opportunities for Atlanta to exploit their running game.
And if they have to do that with their safeties without Rayshawn Jenkins, who knows who's going to fill the gap for him, then you got to worry about Kyle Pitts. And I know fantasy owners out there are going to say, but he only has one touchdown. He hasn't really clicked in this offense. It's still a former top 10 pick, a guy that when I watched him at Florida, I thought was going to be a superstar in the NFL. And that hasn't happened in Atlanta. I still think the talent to do that, though, is absolutely there. And this is the kind of guy we saw George Kittle go out and have a big game against the Seahawks last Thursday. Different players, but Kyle Pitts is a more dynamic athlete. And I have a feeling that the Falcons are going to try to feature him in their passing attack this week with Rayshawn Jenkins being out. They're going to try to pick on whichever backup safety is in there. Even Julian Love has had his share of issues at times this year in coverage. You still have the most athletic, dynamic tight end in the NFL there. If you can just figure out how to use him, I worry this is a game where the Falcons do figure out how to use Kyle Pitts, and he could have a big game with the injury Seattle's got. They have got to be paying very close attention to wherever he's at all times, or he could have a monster breakout game.
He really could. You mentioned Julian Love there. And of course, anybody watched the Seahawks beaten by the 49ers, they're going to remember Julian Love being just a tick late when he got to Deebo Samuel, and Deebo Samuel was able to make the catch, shrug him off, and then run away for a 70-yard touchdown. That's what I worry that Kyle Pitts might be able to do. As you mentioned, George Kittle was the guy, the tight end who actually scored 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks. That's not the game that Kyle Pitts is going to provide. He is not going to be that red zone maven that George Kittle is, but he can be a guy that makes one person miss and then gets on his horse, 4.4 type of speed at 250 pounds. He's going to be able to run away from people. And so considering the struggles with tackles that Seattle's safeties have shown so far, the fact that they're going to have some new bodies at that position, whether it be Kobe Bryant, whether it be Kayvon Wallace, whether it be, again, Ty Okada, you know what Julian Love is, and he is the best of the bunch, but he is the guy that we just mentioned missed that tackle against the 49ers, a back-breaking touchdown for Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel is a different player, of course, than Kyle Pitts, but still the after-the-catch ability is similar. And so, yes, this is a dynamic Atlanta Falcons offense that the Seahawks had better be very, very concerned about.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'll be teaming up with Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, and we'll take a deeper dive into Sunday's upcoming matchup between the Seahawks and the Falcons. You won't want to miss it. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night, and thanks for listening in. As always, go Hawks.